How are you, Ariel?
I'm very good, and you?
I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. Thanks very much for doing this.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I was listening to you playing Schubert this morning. Very nice.
Thank you, thank you.
You've a lovely style of playing.
Oh, that's very nice to hear that.
Yeah. Do you practice first thing in the morning when you wake up, or how does that work?
Uh, well, that's an interesting question. Not quite the first thing in the morning.
Mm,
It's one of the first things usually I do. It very much depends on my schedule. So, living this sort of lifestyle that I do, Uh, I don't have a set schedule, so if I travel someplace, then of course that changes what I will do during the day. But if I'm at home, then I usually get up, have breakfast. Then I
yeah.
like reading a little bit, just in my bed, away from the screen, away from everybody else, with a cup of coffee. And then once I've had enough of that, then I go down and usually start practicing.
And
That's usually how I start my day.
how long would you practice for?
However much is needed. I also don't have a set schedule of
Oh, right.
how long I do, how long
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Right. That's cool. Yeah, I do find as you get older, for me anyways, is practice is like practicing is hard. I do find it just gets hard.
Well,
Like my attention span.
a rule of thumb for me is that
Mm.
half an hour of good practice is worth infinitely more than 6 hours of bad practice.
Okay, okay.
So it's all about the focus and the quality rather than how many hours you put into it. And
Mm.
the amount of hours you put into it has to be in relation to how much repertoire you need to prepare and how well you know this repertoire. And that fluctuates with time and with the situations you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So for me, it's never about the hours themselves. It's about what I manage to do in these hours.
Okay, I get you. Do you like do you remember the first time you sat down to play piano?
No.
You don't.
No.
What age did you actually start playing at?
Well, I started taking lessons when I was about 4.5, but
Wow.
I was tinkering on the piano quite a lot before that. So it all happened very naturally. There wasn't one day that I suddenly started uh, learning piano. So it all somehow came about naturally.
Yeah. Did it just came up was piano just really easy for you to play? Like from the you never really struggled at it.
Well, when you're a kid, then you don't think about whether things are difficult or not.
Right, right.
Um, what's difficult is being a musician, not being a pianist. The musical experience reaches out way beyond the confines of one instrument,
Mm,
and
mm.
to convey what the music has to say to us, that is difficult.
Yeah.
That is a lifetime's investment, and it's worth every minute of it. Of course, I mean that goes without saying. The instrumental difficulties are, of course, there, but they are secondary in importance to the challenge of conveying what great music has to offer to us.
Mm.
Um, so was it difficult? Well, I also studied violin as a kid, and the violin is a much harder instrument than the piano. I
Yeah,
can
it's hard. It's
I can
hard.
I, I can attest to that.
Much easier writing for violin than playing it. That's what I find.
That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah. Do you find like being labeled a prodigy, is that was that a good thing or a bad thing for you, do you think?
I never liked that word.
Right.
I always tried to. I
Why didn't
always
you
tried
like
to.
why didn't you like it?
Well, the implication of the word prodigy is something of a no, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but the implication is something of a circus act,
Okay, I get you.
one trick pony, and I never liked that label. At least that's how I perceived it to be.
Hmm.
Um, it somehow connects to the things that I tried to distance myself from.
Yeah.
Aspects of showmanship, which personally never spoke too much to me. And inadvertently, whether we admit that or not, the label prodigy also has an expiry date,
All
which we
right.
don't know when it is, but it comes with that expiry date. And I was never in this for the short term. I want to, and I want to see myself develop as well as I can over many years. When such a label will be irrelevant anyways. So
Yeah. I'd say it's just a lot of pressure as well. You've been labeled something,
yes, and unnecessary pressure, I think.
yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. And like, who do you like playing the most, composer wise? Is there anyone in particular you love playing?
Whom do I love playing the most? Ideally, whichever composer I'm playing at any given moment should be my favorite composer to play. Having played quite a lot of composers by now, I find myself gravitating back towards Haydn, Beethoven, and Schumann, which isn't to say that these are the only three composers I love playing, of course not. But
Yeah, yeah,
somehow these three speak to me on an even deeper level, and I find that learning works of these three composers takes me a bit longer because I feel the need to explore the whole gamut of expression and emotion when I learn these pieces, and I find myself bouncing between the extremes of
right.
interpretation when I work on works by these three composers. After which I can find, in a way, the center or the range of expression where I want to be. Um, but I need to bounce around. I need to push myself beyond my limits when I work on these three composers. Probably the most ridiculous performances I gave were of these three composers too, because I was stuck in these extremes.
Okay.
Um, and yet, when I find this center of expression, when I find the range where I think I need to be, it's an extremely gratifying feeling. And they linger on in my mind also when I'm not necessarily working on certain pieces of theirs, but it feels like I constantly am.
Yeah. Beethoven is an interesting one because his music is so heavy in some ways, and then he can just go so
Well,
delicate.
not well. His music cannot be pinpointed to any single emotion or any single characteristic. Some of it is heavy, some of it is very humorous.
Yeah.
Um, Beethoven is almost always a winner, in the sense that he very rarely lets tragedy have the last word.
Yeah, I get
Very
you.
rarely. There are few instances where he does, but they really are few. Unlike Schubert, for example, who looks you in the eye and says that yes, perhaps tragedy does have the last word. Beethoven can have a glimpse into the most desperate moments of grief and then somehow find his way out back into the light. The Hammerklavier Sonata is one of the most spectacular examples of that. The third movement is so grief stricken and so tragic, and yet he emerges out of it in the most titanic way in the last movement, and then even in the end of the third movement, we have hope mixed with menace, and in a way that really only he could do.
So when you're like studying these pieces, you're obviously studying the history of the like you're getting into the whole emotion of what he meant and all that. You're not just studying a piece as to play it.
Yes, well, yeah, I don't know if it's the history, but I definitely try to understand why the composer wrote certain things.
Hmm.
I try to look for the why and not just the what.
Yeah. Do you think you
Uh,
can understand? Because it's hard to really know.
well, I can devote my lifetime to trying to understand that,
Yeah.
and still not scrape, you know, 1% of what there is to understand. And again, it's worth every minute of that effort.
When you're playing those pieces, you're not really you have the sheet music in front of you. Are you actually looking at the sheet music too much, or do you know all the pieces by heart?
When I perform, I know what I play by heart.
Hmm.
Uh, but when I study,
In
I
practice,
obviously look
yeah.
at the score. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot I think sight reading is kind of one thing that can be hard for a lot of musicians. I think I would be a terrible sight reader, I would say. Like I just find it I always like to memorize stuff. I just
Mm-hmm.
the thought of just looking on the I don't know, I think they play differently, when you're sight
Of
reading.
course, yeah. When you sight read, you skim a score. When you study it, you absorb it.
Yeah.
It's two very different ways of receiving music and looking at it.
Yeah. Like writing your own music, do you still write all the time? Or do you have
No,
time
not
to?
really. Well, I did study composition. I'm not a
Yeah,
composer.
right.
Studying composition was of enormous importance for me. It helped me greatly as a performer.
Mm.
I sometimes write for my own desk, strictly for my own desk.
Yeah.
Um, but I do write cadenzas for Mozart concertos where Mozart didn't write his own.
Cool. That's class. Is it it's do you have to choose one or the other? Like that's what I've had this conversation with people of like to learn piano at such a high level.
Hmm.
You do you, do you have to devote one thing or the other? Can you be an amazing? I know most composers are amazing, but like
Oh no, you can absolutely. Yes, it is possible to be a very fine performer and a very fine composer,
hmm,
as we know from history.
Liszt, I suppose, is a good example.
Yes, I didn't devote myself to composition simply because I realized that that is not where my strengths lay, and I think I can say more through the works of great composers than I can through my own works.
Right.
That's why I'm not a composer. But studying composition I think is a very important thing, and I would heartily recommend that any musician do that.
What do you like most about Beethoven? Like, what do you get most from Beethoven? Or any of those three composers, Haydn, that you mentioned, and Schumann?
Wow, that's a good question. There's so many things. Let me try to whittle them down. Haydn is a composer who invites you into his studio personally, and he invites you to see how he writes his works.
Okay.
He shows you his twists and turns. He surprises you. You think that he's going to write an 8 bar phrase, and then he says, "Actually, no. I'll add another 2 bars to throw you off balance."
Yeah.
Haydn is in constant conversation with you. He's trying to trick you into thinking certain things. Uh, there is this incredible intimacy you get from his music, which of course is not the only thing that Haydn gives us. He gives us reverence. He gives us joy. I think Haydn perhaps is the composer who described joy in the greatest detail,
Right.
uh, who has more to say about joy than maybe any other composer. And of course, some of his works are also very tragic. The C minor keyboard sonata, the Stabat Mater, these are works of immense tragedy.
Mm.
But when he is happy, he won't tire of showing you the many ways in which he can be happy. Um, and he really shows us the process of composition in real time, which makes his music so fascinating to study. Uh, Perhaps I'm doing him a bit of an injustice in just focusing on this aspect of his music and not all the other many aspects, but this is one which particularly resonates with me.
Hmm.
Beethoven, as I stated before, finds redemption where we think redemption is impossible to find. And Beethoven shows us how much can be done with the most basic musical material, that he can take two notes or four notes and build
Yeah.
everything and beyond from that little nucleus of music. Uh, of course, Wagner took that same idea and developed it into most cosmic proportions. The other two composers, by the way, who are of immense importance to me, they didn't write for piano, were Wagner and Bruckner. So these are also two composers I gravitate towards, but of course it's a different relationship
I get
when
you.
I don't play them.
I get you.
And Schumann was a fascination for me since my early teenage years. Again, it's hard to describe in a few words why that is, but I always had the feeling that Schumann knows me better than I know myself. Uh, that in his music, every single secret is revealed, and there's this perpetual enigma which pervade everything, almost everything he wrote. It's music which is very hard to fully understand, to fully pinpoint, and yet it has such a wholesome feeling to it that you cannot imagine it being any other way, even though at times it is inexplicable and outright bizarre.
Yeah.
I know I sound rather all over the place
No,
now,
no, I get you.
but
Well, his personality, Schumann was, he had a certain personality.
yes, it was very fragile
Yeah.
personality,
Yeah.
and this fragility does make itself heard in his music. However, it is also touched with a certain resilience that the music will overcome that fragility. And the fragility is mixed together with the resilience. We get both exactly at the same time, and one phrase shows us one and the other. And therein lies the enigma of Schumann. That's why I think his music is so instantly recognizable. It's so captivating. It forces us to embrace that which we cannot really fully explain. And the sense of immediacy and intimacy that he manages to convey is to me nothing short of miraculous.
Is there any pieces in particular that you love playing of his?
That I love playing of his.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I spent last year working on the symphonic etudes,
Wow.
which is a marvelous piece.
Right.
I have played quite a lot the Humoresque,
Okay.
which I consider to be one of the hardest pieces for the piano. But boy, is it worth every minute of the effort. It is a very evasive piece, as my late teacher Hamish Milne said about it when I worked on it with him. But its emotional highs and lows, I think, produce some of the greatest music we have. Some of the most moving, redemptive, and agonized music we
Mhm.
can we can hope to encounter.
You were speaking about how hard that is. What pieces do you find the hardest? It's not I suppose sometimes something is technically hard, but sometimes
Hmm.
some things can be emotionally hard too, like there's a certain, I always think technique is one thing, but there's kind of
Yeah.
another for aspect of
Hmm.
music.
Well, I think overall Schumann is definitely one of the hardest composers to play.
Right.
Um, every work of Schumann I played was in one way or another a struggle. Um, that's because I think his mind was so different from our minds. He thought in
Mm,
such a different way.
mm,
Um, and well, we look at his music and we see the tumultuous and volcanic aspects of it, which of course are there. I believe that in his mind, his music was very organized, methodical, and even didactic. Um, so all of the irregularities which we see
mm,
have a reason, which we can only find if we, for lack of a better word, analyze the music. And sometimes the result we get when we analyze it is so arcane that we think, my God, how are we going to portray this to an
yeah.
audience? And yet we have to bridge that gap between where Schumann was and where we are. Uh, and that's an incredible challenge. I mean, for example, uh, the piece I'm specifically thinking of right now is the F sharp minor piano sonata, the first piano sonata he
Yeah.
wrote. It has a very long last movement, a very episodic movement, which starts in F sharp minor, but then has episodes in tonalities which are quite foreign to F sharp minor. So we have E flat major, C major, A minor, a
Mhm.
couple of other keys. Why did he use these particular tonalities and not others? It's a question I was asking myself until I realized that there were no episodes in these keys in the previous three movements. That's why he writes episodes in these foreign keys in the last movement, because we haven't really heard them before.
Mhm.
That's a very, I don't know, almost nondescript idea for a listener. Why should a listener care whether we heard E flat major before or C major before? What's it got to do with a listener who's come to a concert to just be moved by this music?
Mhm.
And yet we have to convey that because there is a reason why Schumann wrote what he wrote. And my duty as a performer is to make somebody care about these very arcane concepts, and that's a significant challenge.
Yeah. Would you think about music all day? No, I don't mean every second of every day, but on a what
More or less,
yeah,
in
yeah.
one way or another.
Yeah. Would you ever like walking around, like, I know you said you're more of a performer than a composer now, but would you ever be just walking around and you get an idea and you just jot it down, or do you get ideas like that, or how does that work for you?
Very rarely, sometimes. Usually, if I get ideas during the day, it's about how to play certain phrases in certain pieces.
Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay. I because I do find my friends who are piano players, and composers and stuff like that, there's kind of always that different thing of like the really highly skilled piano players think about pieces, and then the composers think about kind of writing stuff more than
Hmm.
actually playing stuff. Does that kind of
Oh, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Do you piano wise? Do you play on a Steinway? Is that what you normally play on, or is there any particular piano you like to play on?
Well, Steinway is usually what I get in concert halls, and yeah, it's a fantastic piano, of course. Probably, yeah, it is my favorite brand of piano to perform on. It's the one I'm most used to.
Yeah, there's a certain sound to a Steinway too, like compared to a Boss and Duffer or something like that, or
And
Yamaha.
and a certain, yeah, a certain feeling to which one gets
Yeah,
used. Yeah.
yeah. There's, I think I like the low end on a Steinway.
Hmm.
It's the low
Hmm.
end kind of when you do just
It's very, very warm.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
It
I
just
mean,
sounds
if it's well regulated, if it's in
yeah,
good shape.
yeah.
Yeah.
Composers wise, who do you think is? I know that's probably it's hard to call a great composer underrated, but who do you think is underrated?
Oh, many composers. I think
Sibelius, I
Haydn is.
think
I think
Sibelius.
Haydn is underrated. I know that's controversial, but I think he should be. There's so many great works of Haydn which should be played more. But oh, I mean, I can give you a list as long as my arm of underrated composers. I think Bruckner is a very underappreciated
Yeah, I would agree
composer.
with that.
He's getting something of a revival now, I
Hmm.
feel. Um,
Sibelius, I think
I
he's a
also
bit.
I mean I think Sibelius is very rightly appreciated.
Hmm.
I love his music. I don't know his music as intimately as I know some other composers, but of course he's a great composer. But I don't think he is underappreciated per se.
Okay.
Um, yeah, well, I think Schoenberg is a very underrated composer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe for understandable reasons, but I think in every period of his life, he wrote absolutely marvelous works. From the early Romantic works he wrote uh, to the 12th tone period. I think in every period of his life, he wrote great music.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you like playing Bach?
I don't play great amounts of Bach. Um, yes, I do very much enjoy playing Bach. Currently, he's not a composer I focus on
Hmm.
when it comes to performing, but that may change.
Yeah, yeah. What about Rachmaninoff?
Rachmaninoff,
I love Rachmaninoff.
well, Rachmaninoff is
Have you
a
done the rack? Have
composer.
you done the rack three?
No, Rachmaninoff is a composer I used to hate as a teenager.
Really?
Yes, I thought it
Interesting.
was. I considered it to be nothing but
Flowery,
pompous,
kind of flowery, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah,
pompous, perfumed, effusions of superfluous emotion,
yeah. Okay.
which belong in Hollywood. And I think I'm changing my mind about his music. Um, I I still have some doubts about some of his pieces. I won't lie. But my opinion has been changed largely by listening to his own recordings of his own
Hmm.
music, which are, for me, some of the greatest examples of recorded musicianship. And in particular, I like the freshness with which he plays his own music. You sometimes can't help but think that he plays his own pieces like Haydn sonatas. There is not an ounce of cholesterol in his playing. It is almost matter of factly. He's almost incapable of playing a gesture which is not in immaculate taste.
Yeah.
But that's not the image you have of Rachmaninoff. At least that's not the image I had of Rachmaninoff. So I have played a couple of his works
Yeah.
in the last few years, and it's not music which is as close to me as Schumann or Schubert or Mozart, but I have learned to embrace it. And look, there are a few works of his which I think are real masterpieces. I think the
Hmm.
Fourth Piano Concerto, which I'll be playing later this year, is a really
Mm.
magnificent work. I think the All Night Vigil, the Vespers, it's a choral work. It's it's about an hour long, mainly slow movements and very diatonic, but there's not a dull moment in there. Um, I think he really has some wonderful music, and it's something I'm enjoying the process of
Yeah.
getting to know.
The stuff you play, do you choose what you play, or do you do?
Well, the solo repertoire I choose on my own. Sometimes I get asked by orchestras to play
Mhm.
this or that concerto, but when it comes to the solo repertoire, I prepare. I choose it myself,
Yeah.
and I carefully choose the works I want to commit myself to. My rule of thumb is if I know what I want to do in every bar of a piece of music, then I start learning a piece. And of course, once I start learning it, I change all of my perceptions and I change all of my views on the piece. I change my interpretations many times. But at least I know that I have a solid foundation
Okay.
which I can build upon
Okay.
rather than lurking in the dark you know trying to find some vantage points.
Yeah. Does it take you when you're learning a piece intently? How long does it take you really to have it off without using sheet music anymore? Is there a
You
I'm
mean
sure
how
there's
long
a,
does it take to memorize?
yeah, like a hard piece. I suppose it depends on the
Most of the
piece.
again, so most of the pieces I learn, I know very well.
Okay.
So I memorizing is usually not an issue. There's
Okay.
some pieces which are particularly hard to memorize for very specific reasons, or some composers who are hard to memorize, and then
Hmm.
I usually spend a little bit more time just trying to get certain corners into my head. But
Yeah.
if I learn a Beethoven sonata, I probably know it by heart,
Yeah.
basic, by the time I'm already learning it physically. So that really is not an issue. Musicians learn music the way actors learn lines.
Yeah. But do you need sheet music? I'm sure you could just pick it out with your ear.
I needed in order to learn the piece because I need to see the markings, I need to see articulation, I need to see
Okay.
dynamics.
Okay.
I need to be able to visualize the music in order to memorize it.
Yeah. Would you kind of, I know it's classical music, but would you improvise in any aspect of your playing?
Um, yes, I mean I often improvise when I practice.
Hmm.
Improvisation is a way of getting to know the language of music from a very intimate standpoint. Yes, I think improvisation is very important. The great composers were great improvisers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't do it on stage necessarily, but
That's what I was asking.
oh, no, on stage I don't improvise. Sometimes in Mozart concertos, uh, he writes fermatas on long notes
Hmm.
leading to the next section, and in that fermata you need to improvise a transition. And I usually have an idea of what the transition would sound like, but I try to leave something for the spur of the moment.
Okay. Would you listen to any jazz or outside of classical
Oh,
music? What do you listen
outside,
to?
I used to play jazz
Oh,
as a
really?
teenager. Yes, very badly, but I did play jazz.
It's a
Um,
completely different way of playing
it
and
is a
approaching
completely
the piano.
oh,
Completely
it's
different.
a completely different way of listening,
Yeah.
of playing. Yeah,
Like Art
of
Tatum playing Art Tatum and
conceptualizing music.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I'm an avid lover of jazz.
Really? Who do you like? there anyone in particular? Oh, it's a hard question.
Again, I can give you a very long list of
Coltrane, Davis. Yeah, there's so
Coltrane, Davis, Bill
Bill
Evans.
Evans. Oh my God, his sound is just incredible.
Yeah,
Like such a
yeah,
feel he had. It's just
yeah,
unbelievable. Like
yeah. Errol Garner, another
yeah, that's
particular favorite of mine.
yeah. Eric Carter's great.
Again, I can go on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Would you ever like think that you might play jazz at the kind? Would you ever at the level you're playing classical? Would there ever be a time you might do that?
Very, very unlikely.
Really, really.
There are plenty of good jazz musicians. I don't think
You're still young. You're still young. Plenty of time.
I well, and I still have a long way in improving what I mainly do. Of
Yeah, I get you. Do you think it's kind of endless, the
course it
aspect of,
is.
yeah.
That's what makes it so fun and so exciting. Of course it is endless.
Mm, mm,
Um, it would be much more dull if it weren't.
mm. Do you listen to like modern music, or, like any modern music?
Less, but you know, sometimes when yeah.
Would you get anything if you listened to the Beatles from it? Is there anything, for example, just
Well, when I was playing jazz, I actually had a jazzed up version of Eleanor Rigby.
no way.
Yes.
That's
Um,
pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Your recordings you did of Schubert.
mhm.
How did you record them? Was it in the studio or was it in a home?
Yes, it was in a studio.
Mm,
It was in the Royal Academy of Music, my alma mater,
hmm
which built a very nice recital hall, which also functions as a studio. And at the time, I was on the bicentenary scheme of the Royal
uh,
Academy of Music, which is a scheme where selected students get to do a number of projects, including a recording.
hmm
And that was actually done during the second lockdown,
All right.
so that kept me nice and busy.
Yeah.
Um, we had like 2.5 days of intense work in the studio, uh, focusing on these two wonderful works, the D major sonata and the Momo Musico. We worked on them in a very methodical way,
hmm
section by section, and then and then we pieced them together. The producer with whom I worked, Philip Hobbs, is a real magician and has a phenomenally sharp ear, and he really could pinpoint everything which needed to be, you know, which needed to be ironed out, and not just in terms of wrong notes, but in terms of what is the narrative I was trying to convey and where I could sharpen that narrative. So it was a very gratifying
Yeah.
experience.
The recording is lovely. Was it a Steinway? I thought it sounded like a
Yes, it
Steinway.
was a
Oh,
Steinway.
okay,
Yes.
I was thinking it was a Steinway. Yeah, just that, yeah, just have a sound, don't they? But so you did it in pieces. You didn't do full take of something. You
No,
did
no,
the pieces.
we did do full takes, but after we did the full takes, we went
Oh, you
section by
edited
section.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
No, no, we did. Of course, we did full takes.
Okay. I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you like recording in the studio as opposed to
I do.
live?
It's a very different
Yeah.
experience, and I still believe the most optimal experience for music is live in the moment. What remains with you once the work is done is the memory of the performance.
Yeah.
Uh, but one cannot one cannot diss the medium of recording. It's a different set of priorities and different aesthetic values, but at the end of the day, the works are the same works. The great
Yeah.
composers are the same great composers, and what you're doing is essentially the same thing. You're conveying great music, but through a different medium.
Yeah, it's a completely different approach, isn't it? It's
Oh
kind of
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Is there any moment that you played live that was like, I'm sure there was many. Was there, is there A few in particular that kind of stood out to you that you were just like, wow, that you know, it was just something you remembered.
Um, yes, there were a few. They mainly had to do with the piece I was playing.
Mm.
2 years ago, I was playing the Hammer Clavier Sonata, and it, it's by far Beethoven's most wild sonata for piano. And the last movement is a fugue where you almost feel you're fighting with the instrument and with the composer. And in the midst of all this polyphonic push and pull, I sometimes remember thinking, what am I even doing? You sometimes get so overwhelmed by what's happening in the music that you cannot take a step back and observe it because you're in the middle of doing it, but part of your mind does that for you.
Does it affect your playing, you think, in that aspect?
It's not up to me to judge. I don't know. I'm afraid I cannot tell you because I don't remember exactly where that was. So I'd have to listen to a recording and I would have to recognize exactly the point where I had that thought and see if anything changed in my playing. My guess is it didn't, but who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Would you be quite difficult? I know myself, like I release music and I don't think I've ever been fully happy with anything. I can go, "Oh, I like that, and I can go, it's good,
Hmm?
but I don't know, am I ever fully ever happy with anything? Like when you
I
listen back,
certainly am not.
right, right. Would you listen back and
No, no,
go,
no.
"Ah,
I certainly am. I'm never fully happy with what I do.
yeah,
Um, and I don't mean this in some sort of masochistic way, and I'm not trying to pose as the suffering artist, but whenever let's say I record a piece of music and I go back to that recording even 3 months later, my idea of the piece has changed, and I inadvertently think, oh, this phrase I think would sound better if I would play it
yeah,
in that way. And but that's what makes being a musician so inexhaustibly exciting. Um,
yeah, yeah."
there is no end point which you reach
No, no,
where you say that you've done everything you can do with a certain piece of music, especially when it's great music.
yeah. I think it's quite healthy in a way
Of
because
course, it is.
it just pushes you, it
Yeah,
pushes you
yeah,
to
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of do better and, I
And
guess,
to constantly look for new answers, new solutions for musical problems.
mm, mm.
Um,
That's the always thing about music, about writing music. There's always that there's always that thing of like everything's been done. Someone always says everything's been done, and then you're like, is everything been done? Because there's so much great music, and you're like, is it? I always struggle with that one. Is
no, no, no,
everything?
no. Everything has not been done. I mean, even nothing. No, that statement is false, whichever way you look at it. Even
Why do you
when
say
it
that?
comes to
Why do you say
no,
that?
because even when it comes to playing music which has been played thousands and thousands of times,
Okay.
there is always something new to discover in a score of music, a way of playing a phrase which you didn't think of the last time you played it,
Mm,
fluctuations of tempo, of dynamics which didn't cross your mind, which you thought might have been in bad taste the last time you played it, but now you realize actually have some potential to. Um,
I
there's
sup
always something more to discover.
I suppose I'm talking more in the aspect of composition because there's
Oh, and of composition.
yeah, yeah, that I find that kind of there's so much music out there. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
now recorded music out there that it's not that it's hard, but it's a challenge maybe to make something that is its own thing. You know what I mean? And not because there's just so much music out
Yeah,
there.
but that's the question that composers faced since time immemorial.
Yeah.
Should they be doing what other composers did, or should they be searching for new avenues?
hmm hmm
That was Wagner's dilemma. Should he be treading where Beethoven tread, or does he do something new?
You know, like I'm not, I don't know, I know Haydn, but I don't know much Haydn. So when you said
Mhm.
that Haydn is underrated, I was thinking, maybe you're kind of right, like, because I know
I mean,
Haydn.
I say
I know
he's
the main
underrated
Haydn.
because I say he's underrated because he usually is thought of as the one between Bach and Mozart, who are obviously these two titans of music, and Haydn is just what happened in between the two. But he was such a tireless innovator,
hmm
and
In what aspect do you mean, like innovation?
oh, in form, in aesthetics, he really, in a way, cemented so many of the concepts that we almost take for granted today. Of course, he didn't necessarily invent them. He took forms which were already existing, but
Expanded on them,
but
really.
he expanded them, and he
Yeah.
he solidified them.
Okay. Okay. Like I got to go back and listen to more Haydn now. Like sometimes some things that like I know his well-known pieces and stuff like that, but just kind of the more in-depth stuff I wouldn't
Mhm.
be familiar with. So yeah, I must do that. I watched you playing the I think it's Piano Concerto number 10 by Mozart. Was that it? Yeah, I think it was. The
Number
Piano Concerto
10.
number 10, was it Mozart? Maybe I'm wrong.
Uh,
Maybe I
I
got
do.
that
I
wrong.
did play. I did play quite a few Mozart concertos, but I think those were others
Was it
you may have
10?
heard.
Maybe I got it wrong. It's on
Uh,
YouTube. It was a
right.
Mozart piece you were playing, and there was an orchestra with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was that.
There. No, it would have been one of the later ones.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I got that wrong, but it was very nice. I
Yeah.
was the compliment coming there, even though I got the thing wrong. But I must find
Thank you.
which one it is and send it to you afterwards. Damn, I totally got that wrong. But yeah, yeah. Do you what do you think of? I'm not a massive fan, but like avant-garde piano compositions and pieces, like it's not my.
Um.
I like there's an aspect of it I like, but when it goes on for 10 minutes, I'm like, ah, you've lost me, man.
Mhm. Well, it's not who I am.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I just don't like that it's kind of seen as some sort of there's the jag genius being put towards some of that stuff. I find just ridiculous.
Perhaps it's not up to me to comment on.
Okay, okay, I get you. So like before I let you go, what are you working on now? What are you practicing?
So now I'm working on two Mozart concertos. The big C major K503 and the famous A major concerto K488. Both absolutely miraculous pieces, full of grace, energy, opera, and so many more things. I'm learning the Schubert G major sonata,
hmm
which is a work I've wanted to learn for a long time. It's a work which has fascinated me for years now, and I'm very happy to be playing it in a number of concerts, which will be coming up. And in addition to that, I am preparing a recording of piano music influenced by the organ, which will have
Okay,
works by Mozart, César Franck, and Max Reger.
okay,
César Franck is a very underrated composer. We were talking about those before, so I would definitely include him
okay,
in that list. And so the exact works are the F major Andante for mechanical organ by Mozart, César Franck's Prelude, Aria, and Finale, and Max Reger's Variations and Fugue on a theme by Bach.
Okay.
These are works which are not very often played, but I want to make a case for them. I
Yeah.
think they deserve to be heard. They have a lot to offer, and they're all extraordinarily rich and nourishing, uh, not just polyphonically, but also texturally and melodically.
Like
And
stuff we'll say like free piano box stuff, and it's played on harpsichord and stuff. How do you interpret that with regards to dynamics when you're playing on the piano?
I think fundamentally one should use what one has in terms of the instrument. So if if we play on an instrument that has a dynamic range, we should use that dynamic range and not try to replicate
I get you. I
the
get you.
sound of the harpsichord on the
Yeah.
piano or the way one would play the harpsichord on the piano because that's not really doable.
Yeah.
However, one should be aware of not just the limitations of certain early instruments, but also of the advantages of certain early instruments.
Hmm.
Um, Early instruments were very good at speaking rather than singing.
Okay, I
And
get you.
so on early pianos, on early keyboard instruments, we have a very acute sense of articulation, which was of paramount importance for these composers. And we must not forget that when we
Hmm.
play on the much bigger, louder, more saturated
Yeah.
modern instruments.
And they were bright instruments. You know, they
Yeah,
were
well, I
very
mean,
bright.
the modern instruments have a much, of course, have a much larger range of sound
Hmm.
and dynamic and articulation. Um, and so we shouldn't restrict ourselves necessarily when we play early music, but we ought to remember what these instruments were good at doing, and that was speaking and articulating things.
Hmm.
So we mustn't lose that aspect when when we play Bach or Mozart or Haydn or Beethoven.
Yeah, yeah. Before I let you go, what do you think of all those things of it? I'm not mad about them, but you know when this the greatest of all time, you know, people go, he's the greatest of all time, Mozart or Beethoven's greatest of all time. And I kind of think there's
I roll my eyes when I
yeah, me too, man. I just there's you're comparing it's
they're not in competition.
yeah, yeah. It's just like I do find it just a bit stupid because there's so much you can get from different from
Yeah,
Mozart and Beethoven and you know and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff. It's just it is.
They're not in competition, and thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, on that note, hey, thank you so much for doing this, Ariel. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you. It was a
time.
really great pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you very much, and I look forward to your next record. Have you any uh, example of when you're gonna actually go into studio again to record anything? Or...
Yes, I will be doing it. I will be recording it pretty soon, and it should be released sometime next year.
Okay, great. I'll have a
Yeah.
listen to. Actually, do you know an Irish composer called John Field?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, very pre
Pre
Chopin
Chopin.
kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lovely, lovely works. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. Good old Irish in there. Yeah, thanks very much for your time, man, and
Thank
have a
you.
lovely day. And hopefully, if I
You
ever get
too.
to London, I'll definitely check you out if you're playing somewhere.
Please let me know if you're in London.
I will do. And if you,
Would be great. Would be great to meet you in person.
for sure, if you ever get to Ireland, let me know, and we'll have
I
a hang.
absolutely will. Yeah.
Great, man.
You'll be the
Great,
first to know.
great. Hey, thanks
Take
very
care.
much. Have a lovely day.
You too.
Cheers, brother. Bye bye.